People who've seen nice people finally snap. What happened? This woman, Mary, I worked with was always pleasant and cheerful, said hello in the lunchroom, and was generally liked. She worked in finance in special projects. She said she wanted to retire in a few years, and she had been working there for 15 years. Her boss started pressuring her to complete our annual budget report faster, but this thing is huge and comprehensive and a figurative beast. Mary told the boss it would be ready in a couple of weeks, per the usual schedule. The boss said that it needed to be completed within 1 week, to give to the higher ups. Mary said it wasn't possible. Boss emailed Mary plus CC a bunch of coworkers and the assistant managers, calling Mary out for a poor work ethic and for making the department look bad. Mary said it wasn't possible and didn't appreciate being bullied. She put in her notice to retire by the end of the week, leaving her boss high and dry. She was the only one who could do the budget report in a timely manner, so the department was double fucked. Good for her. Wait, did Mary reply all on the email to say she didn't appreciate being bullied, because that would be pretty epic? She was an assistant manager and was known for being soft-spoken. At a manager meeting, one of the general managers, who was known for being a total jackass to everyone, was going off on how every store should be run. Well, she snapped. You have the highest turnover rate out of any store in the district. You can't keep employees for more than 6 months before they just quit, all saying you were the problem. Maybe you should take that advice you're giving us and you sit on yourself. God, I fantasize about saying something like this to my boss every damn day. Back in the 6th grade, I was in a class with this kid we'll call Hudson. Now Hudson was the nicest, calmest kid in the entire school and almost never spoke a word. Then came along someone who we'll call Will. Will was from a nearby city, and since we were all from a small little town, he thought of himself as above everyone else. This resulted in him being an overall piece of shit to everyone around him, whether it be students, EAs or even teachers. One day Will decided he wanted to try picking on Hudson, who was sat quietly reading a book. Will walked up to him, spat in his face, and took his book, and proceeded to tear out pages from it. Now, Hudson was a huge bookworm, so seeing a book having its pages being torn out by Will must have snapped something, because he lets out this unholy shriek and launches himself out of his chair and right onto him. Hudson then proceeds to beat the absolute crap out of him, and then, just when you thought he was done, he grabs the book and begins smacking him with it. I'm talking meaty slaps here, these could be heard very clearly. After almost a full minute of Hudson beating him with a book, a teacher finally returns to the class, only to see the quiet kid beating the ever-loving shit out of the prick with Harry Potter, the Deathly Hallows. If I remember correctly, Will managed to get off with only 3 days suspension and Hudson got at least a full week. When Will came back, he had a broken nose and enough bruises to make him look like a human grape, if you looked at him right. Needless to say, Will didn't mess with anyone after that. I guess his love for Harry Potter was very serious. My best friend had lost his mom to murder a few months prior, when we were in the 10th grade. Somehow he had pulled himself together just enough to start going back to school. I don't know how he handled it with being an only child and growing up without a father. His mom was all he had. A kid that thought he was popular, that got on everyone's nerves, cracked wise to my friend's face about his mom's death. What he said isn't exactly sure. My friend threw him on the ground and punched him in the face multiple times. The end result was a broken nose, a broken left orbital, and my friend got kicked out of school. We were very grateful he taught him a lesson, but saddened it had to come at such a high cost. I'm not sure whether they kicked the correct one out, honestly. It's like curing symptoms, but not the cause. Back in 5th grade, I was super lucky to have the elementary school's favorite teacher. Every single student loved her. My class was always super loud and annoying. We were working on some assignment before PE, and everyone was passing her off. She was only allowing students to go out if they finished the assignment. My slow ass was unfortunately one of the last kids in the room. This one student, who was a god-awful and annoying shitbag kid, was being way over the top. My teacher got up, put her hands over her ears and just started screaming, "Shut the fuck up. Just shut up. Shut up. Shut up." And she just stomped out of the room, still screaming with her hands covering her ears. All of us just sat there in horror. Couple of kids just left to go to pet and I sat there just trying to finish the assignment. Our principal came into the room a few minutes later just telling the rest of us to go out to pet, but she made the shitbag kid stay in the room with her. He was moved into the other 5th grade teacher's room after this. She was completely normal and fine after coming back. And there was nothing else that went wrong for the rest of the year. Just worked her ass off and made all of us love her by her caring soul and all of that fun stuff. But that moment completely traumatized me. There was a teacher in my grade school that was the mean teacher. He was a great guy, very nice, but they gave him all of the behavioral hard cases because he could put a stop to it well enough. In one situation we had a substitute teacher. Partway through a pair of the students in the class just flat out kept pushing and pushing things, talking loudly, ignoring her when she tried to get them to stop, etc. Eventually she just burst out crying and left the room. Another teacher swapped in for the rest of the day. The next day our normal teacher was back. He taught us the first lesson, gave us our assignment to do, then told those 2 kids to stand up and follow him. They were brought outside the school and there he screamed at them for 10 minutes straight. Nothing bad in the sense of cursing or any of that, but of the sort of, how dare you treat a substitute teacher that way? She's trying to teach the class variety. We could hear it clearly through the cinder block wall, and it was equal parts scary and giggle-inducing in us. Eventually the screaming stopped, and a few moments later the 3 came back in, the 2 kids looking like they weren't quite sure if they had died and were just slow about hitting the ground. A long time ago, I used to do call center tech support for fairly complex issues. A really nice, quiet guy went through the same training class. He talked if you talked to him, but never went out of his way to chat. Right after training, the call center changes a ton of stuff. We start getting squeezed on the amount of time we can do documentation, how much research time we have, just metrics in general. It was utter bullshit, because the favorites got to go on smoke breaks as often as they wanted with the managers. We'd essentially be punished for that, because we had to keep the average numbers in a certain area. He did all the right things. Talked to his manager, talked to their manager, then do ours. It kept getting worse, plus enforced overtime. Then he got a super long call. He was on it at least 2 hours about a complex issue, and the customer was just straight up abusing him, but he had to take it because the managers wouldn't give permission for him to hang up, and they were basically screaming at him to resolve this issue and get to his next call, but we couldn't end calls. The customer had to. One day he just stood up, stepped onto his chair, then onto his desk, threw his headset on the desk and sort of growled something like, "Fuck this," quietly. He looked around, staring people in the face, especially the people who took those long breaks and the managers. Then he walked out and no one ever saw him again. Everyone was super quiet and afraid to move or say much of anything. So people would go on smoke breaks with mangas, which would slow everything down, and you guys would have to make up for them. I used to manage a pub in a small rural town, population around 300, in Australia. Running the pub was mostly a business of maintaining the peace between the itinerant oil and gas workers and the local cattle industry families who resented their presence. The flashpoint for this conflict was frequently the jukebox in the bar. The oil and gas guys were usually city folks on fly-in, fly-out rotations, so their musical tastes somewhat differed to the locals. Anyway, so there's a guy we'll call Brian who is the heir apparent to one of the larger cattle empires in the district. Super cool guy, everyone liked him, would give you the shirt of his back sort of thing. Brian had a daughter who just married and was pregnant with her first kid. Sometime during the pregnancy she'd noticed a dodgy looking blemish on her butt, though she figured she'd wait till she had the kid to get it looked at. Months later, she's had the kid, goes to get it checked. Skin cancer, metastasized everywhere, weeks to live. There's a huge funeral. Brian is destroyed. At the end of the church service there's a procession of vehicles out to the cemetery. Some Halliburton truck, impatient to be caught behind it, closes down the side of the road and spews dust over the whole thing. From then on Brian would be down the pub every other night. He'd get half smashed and then put that fucking If I Die Young song on the jukebox that was popular like 10 years back. Man was circling the drain but nobody really knew what to do about it. Anyway, one night, Brian's at the bar and the song is on the jukebox. Some guys in Halliburton patched Hivers start bitching about the song choice. I tell them to just leave it be, but one of them gets up and unplugs the jukebox. Brian plugs it back in and puts the song on again. One of the Halliburton guys calls Brian a depressing old cunt. Brian tells him to get fucked and, well, I don't remember who threw the first punch. But between the fight starting and the couple of seconds it took me to break it up, Brian did enough damage to put the guy in an ambulance. Edit. For those wondering how this all turned out for Brian, there was no trouble with the police because the town didn't even have a police officer at the time and the gas worker couldn't have his boss knowing he'd been brawling with the locals at the pub. I haven't lived out that way for a couple years, but last I heard Brian was still running the family cattle stations and de facto raising his granddaughter because the son-in-law works FIFO, 3 on and 1 off. Shit, what, were there no other locals in that day/night? I grew up small town Queensland and that kind of disrespect would have started an all in where I'm from. One of my middle school friends, whom we'll call Bob, was about a half foot shorter than everyone else. Everyone was around 5 feet. He was an interesting, in a good way, dude. Interested in learning, played video games, was great to hang out with, but he looked scrawny. Didn't look like he could hurt anything, if I'm being honest. For some context to the story, our gym teacher was an asshole. Gave nicknames, some good, some bad to everyone. He was always sarcastic, always berating everyone, speaking down to us instead of encouraging them. One day the gym teacher says something about Bob's mom, which Bob's mom had fibromyalgia and some other conditions making her weak and unhealthy not by choice. And something in Bob snapped. Bob completely took down this 6.5 foot monster gym teacher. Gym teacher looked like he stood no chance at that time. They were quickly pulled apart and Bob got expelled and had to move school while the gym teacher was fired for fighting a student and being an overall asshole. Gym teacher was fired for fighting a student. The teacher fought back. I mentioned this in another thread. Samoan friend. Happiest, most friendly guy you ever want to meet. Some guy said something about his sister and of course it made him mad. My friend went after him and caught him. Punched about 3 times and we realized he was going to kill him. It took 3 of us normal sized guys to hold his arm back from hitting the guy one more time. We told the other to run, like run fucking now. He did. Our friend was mad at us for a while for stopping him, then he went home. The next day it was as if nothing happened. He just went back to being a super nice guy. PS. I forgot a couple days later our friend's big brothers were looking for that same guy that got the crap beat out of him. I don't think they found him, but never did see him again. Never fuck with a Samoan. The English were so scared of them that they were the only race, other than the Gurkhas, that had honorary white status. Source: look at the Australian Constitution, 1912. Older brother's wedding. He's a very nice guy, almost too nice. He had a horrible girlfriend. He adored her though. She told him that he wasn't good enough and that she would break up with him unless he bought her this super fancy ring and married her. He did. His wedding was very stressful and she was extra nasty. After they cut the cake, she got herself a huge slice and left him with none, telling him he should go on a diet. For context, he was underweight. He was working his way up to average. He snapped, threw a handful of cake at her pretty dress and hair, then told her to expect divorce papers to sign. He proceeded to scream, cry, and rant about how horrible she was and how she made him suicidal. He's better now. They split up and live in different continents. Sorry for bad grammar and typos. I'm on mobile. Damn dude, fuck that woman. I had just started high school and there was a new kid. I was from a 1 primary/1 high school town, so all the kids already knew each other. He was a giant aboriginal kid who was quiet with no friends, so my friend and I befriended him. We always chatted to him, and he was so lovely, always softly spoken, and generally just so nice. Like holding doors open for us, and bashfully smiling when we would go out of our way to be friendly to him. Anyway, he started getting picked on by the bad boy of our grade relentlessly. One day he snapped and beat him up with a garbage can and was expelled, and I never saw him again. Damn, getting expelled for taking out the trash. When I was in high school, my group of like 6 friends was sitting at a round table in the cafeteria for breakfast. A table over, some girls had been tossing small chunks of their food in our direction. My one friend, M, wore her hair in an unusual, spiked up style, and I guess the girls at the table were trying land food in her hair while cackling to themselves. Cue my quiet, sweet, introverted friend, K, getting so angry I swear steam was coming out of her ears. One of the girls had thrown a decent sized piece of her egg patty at us, and it landed on the floor near K's foot. K proceeded to step on the egg patty, pick it up off the ground, walk over to the table of bullies, and shove the egg directly into the mouth of the one who had thrown it. This was such an amazing moment in my high school memory. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, as K was the last person I would have expected to do that. Of course she did get in trouble, but she didn't regret it one bit. I'm sorry, what is an egg patty? Guy I'd worked with for about 10 years, never could get ahead at work, wasn't bad, but just didn't really excel. He was always kind, always ready to laugh and crack a joke. Never saw or heard him be mean, but apparently him and his wife were having some trouble, though I'd not heard him talk about it much. But one day, while his youngest was out at church with a family member, he flipped out and shot his wife, then himself. Another woman I worked with even prior to that, but at the same place, was super sweet and always smiling. She was mid-divorce and drowned her 3-year-old daughter in a bathtub at her dad's, the kid's grandpa's, because she didn't want to share her with her ex after the divorce. She's still in prison as far as I know. Both are kinda fucked up. Where the fuck do you work, dude?